Hi, I am Dennis Sisi, and on behalf of the Spiritist Groups of California, I would love to welcome you to our first California Spiritist Learning Series, or CASLS. We all know that the pandemic has been extremely hard on all of us, and that we've missed an opportunity to interact with our Spiritist friends and talk about soulful and enlightening topics. The California Spiritist Learning Series was designed by the California Spiritist Association to fill that void. It is composed of two different parts. First is a virtual mixer that allows you to spend some time with your old friends that you haven't seen in a while and to make new ones. And the second is an opportunity to listen to an engaging and inspiring talk that makes us think about important topics. And our hope is that you feel inspired to continue the conversation at home or perhaps visit one of the many Spiritist groups here in California. Wherever you are in California, there might be a group near you, and if not, they're all operating virtually. Visit calspiritist.org to find more information about these groups. And now, let's get ready to listen to Dr. Suzana Simões. Suzana is a friend of ours that you may already know from many of the different efforts she's part of. She's a founding member of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in Miami. She has worked tirelessly at the Florida Spiritist Federation and been part as well of the United States Spiritist Federation. You might also recognize her as one of the hosts of the Spiritist Conversation podcast and many more efforts. We are really thrilled to have Suzana here with us as she brings a pondered approach and an engaging way to share with us really important topics that speak to our soul and also enlighten our minds. We are very glad that you're here, Suzana. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. And I'm thrilled. I'm excited to be invited to the beginning of this California series, which I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful initiative. So thank you for inviting me. And the topic of today, of course, speaks to the times that we are living, right? So these are very complicated times, very difficult times that many of us experience as like major crisis, and with so many different feelings, that we hear people talk about, feelings of sadness, feelings of loss, feelings of anxiety. For many folks, a lot of fear, and also different emotions that comes with this roller coaster that we find ourselves in, such as frustration and sometimes, why not, anger, right? But perhaps one of the feelings or emotions that we cannot say, I mean, us spiritists, that we are experiencing at this time is one of surprise. And why do I say that? Because we are, if we have been in spiritism, we are well aware of the times that we are living right now. We are living times of transition. Our planet is in a process of going for a planet of trial and expiations, where pain, suffering, matter prevails over spirit, and evil prevails over goodness, to a better place, a place where we'll definitely experience less suffering, that goodness is going to be more, it will prevail, or at least the balance will shift a little bit, right, towards more goodness and more kindness and respect in this world. So that's all good. But in order for that to happen, we have to go through this transition, to this transformation, to, our planet is being shaken to the core. Let's put it this way. And all that has been announced. If we go to Genesis, the signs of times is right there. And it will say things such as, we have heard that these times were coming. They shall hear talks of wars and rumors of war, but guard yourself well against being troubled, for these things must occur. But these will not yet be the end, for you will see nation rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be plagues, famine, earthquakes, and in many places. But all these things will only be the beginning of things. So it was all said. It's written. We have the explanation as the prediction here says, guard yourselves well against being troubled because those things must occur. So in order for us to make the transition, it's necessary that we are the transformation takes place. And with transformation, there's always the experience of pain and loss prior to the experience of the new things, the new experience, and the new earth, um, using Eckhart Tolle's expression, right? So when we think about life and when we think about progress, we're thinking about seasons. So our life has different seasons, and so uh, progress in a way. So we go to different times. We go into different season. So there are times where things are better, or at least they feel better. They're sunnier, they're warmer, they're more fun, they are more lively. We go to the summers of our existence. But then there are times where things are beautiful. You have the flowers, you have the spring of the existence, things are blossoming. And then there are times where the leaves are falling and things are starting to change. And certainly, in whether we're talking about our life, whether we're talking about progress in our evolution, there will be some tough winters. There will be some hard winters. Um, those times of trial, of hardship. And it's interesting because we're going to find in one of the letters of Paul to Timothy, actually, one of the last letter, if I'm not mistaken, where he invites Timothy to be with him. And he will say to him, do your best to get here before the winter. Because it's not wise to travel during the winter. You want to travel before the winter. You want to be, when the winter hits, you want to be ready for the winter. You want to be at a safe place with all the 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 nourishment, with everything that you need in order to be able to bear that winter um, the best way possible, right? And I feel like for us spiritists, that is precisely what we have been doing. We have been trying to get to a safe place before the winter hit us. So, how have we done that? We've been traveling through the journey of spirituality. We have been studying spiritism. We have been getting acquainted with the gospel and all these ideas, these important ideas such as our future life that gives us a perspective about where we're going, ideas such as the immortality of the soul, which really, really changes entirely the paradigm that we live in and how we live, and understanding our own existences, who we are, and so forth. Um, understanding God, understanding the reason for our pains and sufferings. So, all of these things are, in a way, I think they speak about the journey that we have undertaken to get to this time, which I'm going to call tough winter, prepare to undertake it uh, in the best way possible. And Jesus, when there's a reference that he brings, when he's referring specifically to these difficult times that we are undergoing, where that the planet would be hit. And he recommends that those who are in Judea to flee to the hills, This is in Gospel of Matthew 24:16. And Emmanuel has a message on the book, The Truth, the Way, and the Life, where he actually comments on this passage from Jesus. And he says that Judea is, the way we understand Judea is as a spiritual region of all of the folks, all of the people um, who, due to their inner aspirations, they seek to be close to Jesus for their inner enlightenment. So it's really, Judea really represents a state of the spirit of those who are seeking to um, acquire a higher level of consciousness and are seeking Jesus with this purpose. So to those folks, right, he recommends that they flee to the hills. And the hills are really the level of superior ideas. So when the crisis hits, what Jesus is recommending is that we elevate our thoughts and we try to think, experience life from a higher perspective. And this is precisely what the gospel also invites us to do. So when we go to chapter 2, there is one of my favorite items, which is the point of view, where the spirits, in speaking about the difficulties and challenges of our lives, they will say, things feel a certain way when you're standing at the valley, but if you actually go higher to the top of the mountain, your perspective is going to change very significantly. What seems to be huge, what seems to be insurmountable, once you are up there looking from above, becomes relatively small. It changes your perspective. And this is precisely what Spiritism helps us to do. So to give you one example, there is an item in the gospel that talks about true misfortunes. And so the spirits are going to say to us that we have a very questionable or erroneous understanding of what true misfortunes are. Because when we're thinking and assessing and speaking about what a true misfortune is, usually we appreciating it from the valley. In other words, from the present moment, from a very perspective, and why not a lot of times material perspective. So the spirits will say, for us, misfortunes are if you lose money, if you betrayed, if you have the loss of someone, especially if it's, for example, a child or people who are in poverty, right? So all those situations we would consider to be misfortunes, but they give us a very different definition of misfortune. They tell us that misfortunes are found much more in the consequences of the things that we do than in the things themselves. So that's something, right? So it has to do, what is a true misfortune is, when you think about this concept, is the poor choices that we make, because they will bring difficult, naturally difficult, painful consequences. In the spiritist vision, that is a true misfortune. So what we are living today is, to some extent, one of these true misfortunes, where at some point, individually and as humanity, we have made choices that were not the best for us. We have been living guided very much by materialistic values, and we have placed our hearts and minds, energy, and effort in things that are really not meaningful and essential. We have treated each other in ways that are really not in line with the law of love. And therefore, today we are, as a result of the need for transition and as a result of how we have been behaving and really not perhaps progressing in the way that we should, we are being shaken and dealing with the consequences of um, the way we have lived thus far. So the crisis is happening for a reason. The pandemic is happening for a reason. But what excuse me, what we invited to do is to look at all of this and to think of it as opportunities, opportunities for growth. When we make good choices, we deal with the consequences of our choices. It's not a punishment. It is a very wise um, way that the law works to make us to dislike our current situation, the imbalances that we have created, and creates in us the desire to correct and to seek a different way of being. So there is an opportunity for growth here. And how do we grow? And that is really the key for our reflection tonight, right? We are growing by studying, for sure, by reading, by listening to lectures, by interacting. That's the first stage of learning where we are being exposed to concepts, important concepts. At some point, we kind of master those concepts in our minds and we're able to teach formally or informally, right? So when you sit with a friend of yours and you start talking about the things that you have heard, you're teaching, you're sharing some knowledge. So that means that not only you have been exposed, but you have given it some thought, you have integrated, and now you're able to speak and share the knowledge with others. That's another level. But then the ultimate level of learning and of growth is when we're able to live, to manifest in our daily thoughts and actions those very concepts that we heard and that we so easily sometimes talk about. It is only when we are able to manifest those concepts in our daily lives that we can claim that that particular virtue or knowledge is now integrated into who we are, into who we have become. Otherwise, it is just a concept, whether something that you heard or something that you comprehend and can share is not yet part of you. And so this is why when we are exposed to something and the divine justice feels that we are ready, we are sent tests, um, exercises and tests. So there is a little story in the book, Jesus at Home, chapter 12, that's called the Four Tests, which I like very much. And it's a little story where this guy was really, really very, very highly evolved on earth. And everybody started talking to God and telling God that he should go to heaven because he was like really, really highly, highly elevated. So, after hearing so much about this guy, God said, sure. So let's test him. And so he sent four tests to this guy who was this candidate for this heavenly position. The first test was a test of want. So he underwent a lot of needs, um, uh, financial needs, poverty, illness, and people who turned their backs on him and everything else. And he actually passed these tests. He understood that God was testing him. He understood that those were building blocks for his enlightenment. He did wonderful. Then the second messenger, the second test was sent to him, and that has to do with money. So suddenly he had so much money so much money, he could do anything he wanted. But he did not forget about charity. And he took the money and he managed the money to do as much good as he could. And so he passed the second test. And then he was sent the third test, which was a test of power. He was given tremendous amount of power. And he once more was very attentive to his mission, and he understood that power was given to him in order for him to lift others, to educate others, to dignify others. So he used his power in a very altruistic and constructive way. And then finally, it came the last um, test, which was anger. And when anger came, anger studied his personality very carefully and identified his points of weakness and found a person who he knew and who knew some things about him. And it was a very kind of rude individual who attacked him, saying things that were somewhat true, but very insulting for someone with his level of dignity and honor. And at that moment, my dear friends, he failed his mission because he got very angry and he started to scream, to yell, and to put these men's families down, and he kind of got lost. And so the angels went back to God and said he needs some extra time on earth because he did not pass the test, the final test. So when one comes to our life, it comes to test our ability to be resilient in face of the trials that God sent us. When money comes, it tests our ability to detach from material things. When we have power coming to our hands, our ability to comprehend that everything that's given to us is a loan from God in order to facilitate the progress and the well-being of others. But when anger comes, it comes to check our self-love and our self-worth. And this is one of the hardest trials for us because of our condition, where we are deeply disconnected from God and we feel very small. And so we become very vulnerable and we get angry very easily. But the point of this story is just to say that this is how we evolve. We don't evolve by reading only. We don't evolve by talking only. Neither one of these things are capable of taking us to where we wish to be, which is a higher level of awareness, of conscious or enlightenment, right? We are seeking enlightenment. Neither one of these things is powerful enough to give us and to establish within us the kingdom of heaven that we so much desire. It is necessary that we testify the things that we talk about and the things that we hold so valuable and so with so much importance within our our heart. So Jesus, as always, is our role model, and he did testify. He who had absolutely nothing to prove or no learning to do here at our level. There's actually a passage in the Gospel of Luke that says, "For if they do these things to the green tree, what will they do to the dry one?" So when we read this and we seek to understand the meaning of these words, obviously that the green tree here speaks to Jesus himself, to our Lord, who was had no spiritual needs at the time. He didn't need to go to these trials. He was not in the he was already a pure spirit. He was in full connection with God. So he was full of the divine sap. And he was a tree that was loaded with branches that gave fruit and flower to anyone who was near him. In contrast with us, we are, as the passage says, the dry ones, right? We are dry because of our disconnection with God and because of the amount of resources that we put into things that are really meaningless to our spiritual evolution, our passions, our illusions. All those things end up drying, draining our best energies. And so when we look at Jesus and his experience and have him as a reference, he testified. He testified what? He testified his love for God. He testified his love for each one of us, right? Not only by dying on the cross to leave us the incredible lesson of immortality, but he testified the moment he incarnated and left the high regions where he probably is to be with us. He testified in the moment of the cross where he wanted to show with us what obedience means, right? What resignation, what surrender. So he gave himself his physical life, attending a plan that God has made, showing um, absolute connection with God's plans, and which were also His plans, right? And following those plans. So the invitation here is for us. We are at a time with, within the transition that we must understand and we must embrace these opportunities. We must not turn our backs. We must not allow for despair or anger to take our hearts, because those are essential steps. Each crisis, each obstacle is an opportunity. And I really love this image of a step of light that we um, step up, right? And that will take us to another level. So we must be willing to testify. There will be no growth if we are unable to undergo these exercises and the tests that are the ultimate tool that will promote us spiritually. So there is a chapter in the gospel that I like very much, chapter 5, and there is an image that speaks very much to what I'm trying to say, which is the image of the soldier in the battlefield. So it says there that the promotion of the soldier and his recognition will only come from his presence on the battlefield. His life, the life of the soldier, only has meaning from the moment that he leaves the headquarters where he has been training, learning strategies to fight the good fight. Man, I love that. So our lives only have meaning the moment that we leave the comfort of our spiritual centers, the top of the mountains where we have been meditating, right? All these sacred places, and enter the sacred place of society, of daily life, with our children, with our co-workers, with our friends, with the day to day, the you know the struggles of each moment, right? That's when life starts to have true meaning, because that's the battlefield. That's the where we are going to be called to fight the good fight. And so that's we were like in this room before, and kind of socializing a little bit, getting to know each other a little bit, and in reflecting about what the pandemic has taught me. It has taught me that I miss being with people, and sometimes even the fights. Not that I'm like wanting that upon myself, but being back on the arena, and there is a part of me that's like, we could be on this online thing forever. It's very comfortable to be speaking from my house and working from my house. I don't have to see people. There's not much going on. But there is no meaning in our lives if we are not on the battlefield. A true soldier prefers the heat of a battle than the type of peace that cannot grant him recognition and glory. That is amazing too, right? So, yes, we can choose to stay in the comfort of our homes. We can choose not to go out on the battlefield, but we are not also going to be able to get the recognition and the glory of entering the kingdom of heaven, or establishing the kingdom of heaven within us, because we need those battles. We need to be able to go out there and we need to be able to testify. So, one more sentence from this paragraph. What does it matter to the soldier if he loses in the fight? His weapons, his luggage, his uniform, as long as he wins and conquers his glory. So, what matters to us if we lose even our physical body, right? Which is equivalent to the uniform here. If we are winning and conquering the glory of being in a better place outside in the spiritual realm and also inside, isn't that the meaning of our lives? So we can certainly only appreciate those things if we are, like I said in the beginning, right? Looking at life from this higher perspective. None of this makes any sense if we would be looking and appreciating life from a materialistic point of view. But I think that at this point in our evolution, for us who have been in the Spiritist movement, it's not, and a lot of people sometimes really misunderstand this, it's not that we are seeking pain. It's not a masochistic approach, but it is like, I'm ready. I'm ready, right? So think about when you put yourself into a graduate course, whether a master, whether a PhD. No one enters a PhD like, oh my God, I can't wait for the defense of my thesis and all that work that I have to put in. But we choose to do that because we know that it is through all that intense labor and that final trial that you will get the recognition that you are seeking professionally, academically, whatever that might be. Well, spiritually speaking, it's the same thing. So, need to be ready to do the work and to appreciate the work from a different perspective and appreciate our trials from a different perspective. And there's more. There's two passages in the gospel that I also really like and brought here for you today. One is in the Gospel of Luke 21, and this will happen so that you might be a witness. And Peter 2:21, to these you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. So, if you have been called, it's because he, the Lord God, life, considers you worth of being a witness. It means that this is the right time for you and you are the right person for this particular test. Have you thought of that? I mean, a lot of times we look at people's lives and the grass on the other side is always greener and our appreciation is often distorted because we look at our neighbor and he or she seems to have it so much better than we have. They don't have trouble. They have money. They live comfortably. There's no difficulties. Anything and everything that they want, they get. They are so fortunate. And I ask you, what are you talking about? What kind of analysis is that? What values are driving your analysis? Because if you're one who is truly, truly struggling and you are undergoing a lot of trials right now, one perspective is the perspective that God considers you worth of being a witness. Think about this. This can be your moment of promotion. This can be your moment of elevation. Perhaps this person who you envy so much is still enjoying the peace of the oh my god, I forgot the word of the when you were still on your compound, right? Not outside in the battlefield. But you are in the battlefield because the general has considered that you were the right person to go out there. It's your turn. It's your turn to testify. It's your turn to bear witness. So Emmanuel has a comment where he says, we were brought closer to Jesus, not only to believe in him, but also to contribute to the expansion of the kingdom of God by our own renewal. And again, I would love to think that we can renew ourselves by reading and by talking, but that's not enough, as we have seen. So the new era, right, is going to start with this transformation within us. And the world outside of us is going to be a better place when it will mirror the transformation that has happened within the hearts of each one of us. Now, naturally, this is not easy. Not always we are going to be as ready as we would like to. And this is not so good news, but the trials, they become a little harder as we pass different trials. They actually get harder and harder. And although this is not good news, this is logic. From first grade to seventh grade, things get harder because the more you know, the harder the tests become, right? But be aware, and this is okay, that not always we are going to be so ready to testify, very much like the disciples of the first moment. And one passage that came to mind was on Mark 14:67, when Jesus is being in prison, and it's the moments before his martyrdom. And a woman recognizes Peter and says, you also were with that Nazarene, Jesus. And Peter, shortly after, he will deny Christ 3 times, right? So in that moment, although he loved Jesus very, very much, perhaps in a way that we believe to love Jesus too, right? We love Jesus. But he was unable to testify. He was unable to prove that he had learned the concepts at that moment. He was taken by fear, by his frailties, by his insecurity. So when time to testify comes into our lives, it is important for us to be vigilant because, just like Peter, we are extremely, extremely frail. Our faith, our knowledge, our consciousness is still very, very frail. So fear, attachment, ambitions, even love. Sometimes we don't do the right thing because we love someone and we rather go with that person's approval of us than to do the right thing, than to be faithful and loyal to our values. We value more the approval of a brother and sister, whatever position that person has in our life, than God's. And so many times we fail in testifying the things that we already know. But just like Peter, we can also get up from our disappointments. It's okay. We can cry, and we will cry many times, like he did, because he was guilty. He was profoundly disappointed with himself. And I don't know about you, but I have had my share of disappointments with myself and had cried some pretty sour tears, right? Which reminds me that Emmanuel has also a very nice page about tears, where he talks about it is okay to cry, and he references many people in the gospel who have cried, such as Mary at the bottom of the cross, or Peter after his denial, or Paul at the door of Damascus, the Christians as they went into the arenas. But one thing that Emmanuel says that they never those tears had any bit of anger or rebelliousness to them. And all of these people, they cry without ever losing hope in the future, hope in themselves. And just like Peter, who were unable to testify, to bear witness to Christ in that moment, just like him, who after all those limitations at first, he became the rock on which the church was built. And so we can be that too. We can pick ourselves up and we can press on, recommitting each day in doing our part during this transition. How? By reflecting, by reading more and more and more and more, by studying more and more and more and more. We need that foundation that can build enough momentum within us and give us the courage of the true Christians, which is not about violence. It's about love. It's about the ability to show our love to God and to Jesus in higher ways, through our deeds, by being faithful to our consciousness, by being faithful to God's laws, by being faithful to God. Because when we talk about adoration to God, there is no way in which God wants to be more adored, and no ways in which we can be more Christian than by abiding to the laws through our testimonies, through our deeds. So I ask God to give us the strength to do that, to inspire us, and to really help us, because we need so much help during these difficult times. Drying our tears, holding our hands, and giving us the strength to get up each day and to commit each day, to give life, to give our neighbor and ourselves the very best. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Suzana. It was a pleasure to hear you bring these different perspectives to us. We are really excited that you're here. It's an important conversation to be had. We know that we've taken a little bit of your time, but we do have a couple of comments and questions that we would love to maybe pick your brain on, if that's okay with you.
Yes, with your help, we can do anything.
With his help, maybe. All right.
Always.
So the first piece that we have here is a comment from Vivian, and she says, "I love the story about the man who failed with anger. Can you share the source? I would love to meditate more about that. That is indeed a great one."
Yes, I'm currently doing Portuguese every Sunday and Wednesday. I'm reading chapters of this book, um, Jesus at Home, and it is chapter 12. I have here in Portuguese, but it's actually great because it has been, yeah, Jesus at Home has been translated to English, and I do have the English version as well. And so, Jesus at Home, this was chapter 12 specifically. It's so beautiful that when I was doing the recording, um, I finished reading the lesson and I couldn't speak. I put the book down and I said, I need to think about this a little bit myself before coming back and actually making a comment on it. Because usually I open those readings and I read and I comment whatever comes to my mind in that moment. And this particular story, I had to put it down and return the next day.
Well, if I press the right button, you can probably see me and ask me. So thank you for sharing that. That is really great. We had a couple of different things in here pop up as well. We want to recognize. Bernadette has a question for us here, and she brings, "How do I know if I'm ready to testify? Can you give some example of testifying nowadays?"
I don't think you do. Just like the man of the story, right? Sometimes we feel so strongly that we are ready. And yet, when the test comes, we fail very, very miserably because it's a huge gap sometimes between the things that we know and being able to testify, right? So testifying nowadays, it's really not different than testifying, I think, any other time, because we can think about testifying in the big scheme of things, right? So, like right now, with so many people dying of COVID, um, so testifying would be um, to really understand life, the higher purpose of things, and not to be, for example, when someone, uh, sadness is a very natural feeling to have with death. In fact, the Spirit's book tells us in the fourth part of the Spirit's book, the Spirits are going to tell Kardec that physical death in our level of consciousness is actually a trial and an expiation for our humanity because of the how material our life is, and the physical absence is incredibly painful. So, but when you go from sadness to depression, depression has always a spiritual component of no acceptance of God's will. So when you testify, it means that you accept. It means that you're able to not only accept the fact, although painful, but you are going to move on by honoring those who left, by taking their legacy and actually using it for your own improvement, for your own betterment. But you can also testify, and we are called to testify every day in the very, very little things of our lives. So, can you testify patience, for example? So, you read and you do a lecture about patience at your center, and there's a beautiful, beautiful paragraph on patience in the gospel. And you do so much research and you feel like, oh my God. And then after that lecture, you go to a retreat and you meditate about patience, right? But then eventually you need to go back and be with your daughter or with your mother or with your husband. And now you've been calling to testify all those things that you have talked about and all those things that you have meditated about. And so, can you bear witness for all those things? Can you treat them with the kindness and the patience that shows respect? because people are at different level of evolution, and a lot of times we get irritated because they are clueless, and that's very arrogant on our side. So we have the sense of superiority. So there is little daily um, situations that we are called to testify, and there are big situations where we are called to testify. So there's no way of like really knowing other than going through it. And then with patients, for instance, you might um, pass some tests. You might be now very patient with, I don't know, a friend or someone. Then be prepared, because someone harder is going to come into your life to take you to the next level of patience. And that's just how it is. And you can't develop, you can't become patient if you're always surrounded by people who think like you, see you as a hero, and think you're the best person in the world, and is willing to do anything that you want. That's not the right person. That's going to help you to become the pure spirit that you wish to be one day. So when you say to God, I'm ready for patience, I wanted to be more patient, be prepared, because God will send the trials that will test you, give you the proper exercises for you to develop this particular virtue. I don't hear you, Dan.
I don't hear myself either sometimes.
Oh,
Thank
now,
you.
okay.
Apparently, there's been a whole year where we are all going virtual, and I still fail to unmute myself, which is the quote of 2020, right? You're on mute.
Yeah, I know.
But you said some wonderful things there, Suzana. You brought a lot of wisdom to the daily, testification or testifying, right? And how we all have things that sometimes we think are not as glamorous. And perhaps we don't realize we're doing it, but yet we're adding value to the world. And I love that you talked about depression as well. And I love that as we start to think about this, there's also another great question here that came from Claudio that I think is another challenge of modern life. And he asks us, how do we deal with the anxiety that we can sometimes feel about the challenges that life might bring us? So any tips on, with that prism, with that lens that you were talking about, on how to handle the anxiety that sometimes we feel with all these things happening at once?
Yeah, I mean, listen, my answer is theoretical, okay? Because I share the anxiety, right? But what we know is that anxiety has a lot to do with control, right? We want to control our lives. We want to have control over things. But the only force in control of everything is really God. So I don't think Jesus experienced anxiety because um, he was in full connection with God. He was certain that everything was going to be taken care of. He had no fear. Fear of what? If you have God and if you have all these concepts, and if you're really doing your best each day, you need to trust that the universe is always um, conspiring for your best. You're only given the best. Now, I'm not talking about like small anxieties, right? You sit down to take a test, you're going to be anxious. That's normal. That's necessary, even because it gets you ready for that test. It prepares you for that test. There's nothing wrong with that. It comes even from our instincts of surviving, of like doing well. But I think that we can do a much better job when it comes to our lives in general. Uh, if we really, really invest on this certainty that God is in charge, that everything, what are you afraid of? Of dying? So many people are afraid of dying, right? And I get it. It's not an easy perspective, but what is our life here? What is this body anyway? What is the real life? If you go back to Spirit's book, it says that the primary world is the spirit world, right? So that is really our home. That is really where we belong. We are here, and I really like this. I don't know, Danny, how much more time do I have? Because I can just talk a little bit more, but there is the passage in the gospel where the transfiguration, right? So Jesus is with the disciples, and then Moses and Elijah appear to him. During that passage, there is a party going on in Jerusalem, which is has to do with the tents. It's a part of the tents where families would go into tents, and they would leave their houses and they would stay there for a week. And that particular celebration has to do with remembering the big exodus and the passage. And so they would do that because they were reliving that experience. And when we think about this passage, we think that in a way we are also in this passage, in this movement, and we are here in tents. Our physical body are tents. We are given a tent to come here. Now, tents are not places where people live permanently. Tents are temporary. We need to bring this idea of immortality into our daily lives and understand that anything and everything that we experience here is a passage, and it's temporary. Our families, for instance, they don't belong to us, right? These are spirits that come together here in this circumstance. But how many mothers, how many fathers, how many children have you had? Life is so much bigger than what we see and experience here. But I mean, so much bigger. So when we start to think about life this way, you know what I mean? Then it's like, okay, you breathe, right? And it's like, oh my God, maybe, I'm there's nothing to fear. When we are connected to the meaning of life and to God, there's nothing to fear. And you can breathe better. And you can sleep better. Because everything is being taken care of. So, about myself, am I someone who doesn't have anxiety? By no means. I'm very anxious sometimes. But those are things that Spiritism offers us, the study of Spiritism offers us to help us to do not take our anxieties to a pathological level, to not allow the anxiety to paralyze us, for example, right? And we have tools that can help us moment to moment, such as prayer, such as reaching out to someone and having the possibility of like talking about it openly and honestly. I think that's very important in these days, that we can count on each other to share our fears, our anxieties, our thoughts, whatever they might be, without fear of being judged and say, what are you crazy? I mean, don't you know everything about spiritism? Yes, I do, but I don't, right? Again, we do at a cognitive level, but not yet at the visceral level. So, but those are the resources that we have to deal with anxiety through spiritism.
Thank you, Suzana. We are so excited that you have had the time to be with us and share some of your wisdom. Thank you so much for being part of this first Spiritist Learning Series. We are thrilled to have you here. And I also want to take some time to invite everybody out there to connect with Suzana. If you want to see a little bit more, from her, I'm gonna share with you here really quickly on our screens her social media information. You can always contact her via YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. And we also want to invite you on the same vein to connect with your local Spiritist group. We have a couple of them here in California, and I'm sure they're eager to talk with you and continue this kind of conversations that are very important to us. You can reach them virtually. They're all virtual these days as well. I'm going to share with you a little bit about them as well here on our map so that you can see it. Come back here on screen really quickly with our friend Suzana. To thank you one more time, Suzana, and also to thank our friend Bernadete for being here. She has a quick announcement she wants to make, and then she will do a final prayer for us. Thank you, everybody, for being here today.
So, and let's move on to our closing prayer. And let's breathe, elevating our thoughts after this amazing talking with our friend Suzana, which we learned so much about testifying, about trials, about being strong, and we had so many good stories and examples that we can base our life and learn from them. We want to say thank you to Suzana. And now we want to ask you, dear Creator, bless each one of us. We are so blessed of being here and having the awareness of the power of testifying, which is to witness. Go there and be an example the best way you can. Wake up in the morning and just like Paul, the apostle, ask, Lord, what do you want me to do today? How can I testify today? How can I be an example? How can I be your apostle and spread the love, plant the seed of patience, of love, caring for each other? We all can do that. Baby steps, and all the ones in the middle. Just like Suzana said, we all go through grades. And we go from first grade until kindergarten, until higher grades. But why do we do this? To build the foundation. And we are building the foundation of love. So at this moment, bless each one of us again with your love and your light, extending to their homes wherever you are. Send healing to all this planet that's going through challenges. And we are being asked to testify, to be more loving, kind, and patient. Give us a strength in the moments of trial, knowing that we are not alone, because we do not testify alone. Jesus is with us, walking side by side, holding our hands, taking us in our arms in the moments of need. So be sure that Jesus is testifying with us. As we feel the peace and harmony in our homes, in our hearts, we want to say thank you. In your name, so be it.